The discovery had been whispered about for decades among fringe theorists and hopeful philosophers, a legendary relic, long spoken of in hushed tones, that could bring about an unshakable peace to humanity, not through force or manipulation, but through pure understanding. Most dismissed it as a myth, something out of an ancient fable. Yet, on one ordinary morning, in the heart of the Andean mountains, the impossible became real. The news spread like wildfire. A team of archaeologists, led by Dr. Amelia Navarro, had stumbled upon the machine. Encased in a crystalline dome buried deep beneath layers of rock and ice, it shimmered with an otherworldly energy. Carvings on the walls surrounding it referred to it simply as the Supreme Instrument. In the sterile, brightly lit briefing room of the United Nations, the world's leaders and top scientists gathered. A delegation of philosophers, religious leaders, and anthropologists sat in solemn rows alongside military generals and politicians. The hum of nervous energy in the air was palpable. Dr. Navarro, flanked by her team, stood at the front of the room. Her voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of reverence. "We believe this artifact holds the potential to unify humanity in a way we've never conceived. Preliminary tests confirm the ancient writings. When activated, it creates a resonance, an emotional and cognitive link between every person in its range." "Are you saying it forces people to feel the same thing?" a skeptical French diplomat interrupted. "No," Dr. Navarro clarified quickly. "It doesn't force anything. It connects. The instrument amplifies empathy by allowing individuals to experience the thoughts, feelings, and memories of others as if they were their own. Selectively, of course. It's overwhelming at first, but transformative. Without destroying individuality, it makes you feel the interconnectedness of humanity." The room was silent for a moment. Then, a deep, gravelly voice broke through. "If this is true," said General Nakahara from Japan, his arms crossed tightly, "then it's also dangerous. Empathy is powerful, yes. But forcing people to share their pain, their fears, their weaknesses? What if a rogue actor harnesses this instrument? What could they manipulate us to believe?" Dr. Navarro met his gaze firmly. "That's why we need to handle it carefully. Not in secrecy, not in the shadows. This belongs to humanity, not a single government, corporation, or faction. If we can't see that already, perhaps we're not ready for its gift." 3 days later, in a sprawling laboratory at Geneva, a cross-disciplinary council convened to decide the next step. Among them was Amir Nasri, a young anthropologist from Tehran, whose curiosity burned brighter than his weariness. Over lunch, he struck up a conversation with a similarly animated colleague, Mei Lin, an AI ethicist from Beijing. "Do you think it can work?" Amir asked, poking absent-mindedly at his salad. Mei fixed him with a sharp look, leaning forward conspiratorially. "It's not about whether it can work. It's about whether we can. Humanity's always had tools for peace, philosophy, art, negotiation. Are we really so arrogant to think a machine can do what countless generations of wisdom couldn't?" "But this is different," Amir countered. "This goes beyond words or ideologies. It's fundamental. It lets us feel the truth behind someone else's story. Isn't that what we've been missing all along?" Mei tilted her head, the corners of her mouth quirking upward slightly. "Still, imagine the chaos if everyone suddenly understood the hatred or the trauma resting in the hearts of others. Do you think we're brave enough to confront realities we've avoided for so long?" The tests began cautiously. First, a small group of volunteers sat in the room with the instrument. The polished sphere at its core hummed softly as the crystalline filigree etched in its surface began to glow. A warm, golden light spilled out, filling the room like liquid sunlight. Minutes later, the first test subject, an aid worker from Ghana, burst into tears. "I don't even know her," she said through gasping sobs, pointing at another volunteer, "but I felt it. Her grief over losing her mother, it's in me, like it's my own." She turned to the other woman, who was blinking rapidly, her face awash in wonder. "And your joy when your son was born, I've never felt anything like that." Each subsequent test was the same. Strangers became participants in one another's inner lives. Disconnected stories wove themselves into a shared tapestry. Arguments fell silent, judgments grew rare. Even the skeptics among the scientists felt their resistance soften as they witnessed something utterly raw and captivating. People genuinely understanding one another, free from the filters of bias and ego. Months passed, and factions formed. "This machine is the answer to war," declared Ilana Rajesh, a high-ranking diplomat from India. "Let the leaders of warring nations sit before it and be bound by one another's pain and humanity. They won't be able to continue their hatred." "But it's an infringement on freedom of thought," countered Sinclair Bauer, an American technology executive. "What you call empathy, someone else could call indoctrination. Who decides how it's used? Who decides when?" Meanwhile, protests erupted outside the laboratories. Some called the instrument a miracle, others a Pandora's box, and buried under debates over ethics, control, and logistics was the one question no one dared openly ask. Do we deserve this power? One night, months into the international debate, Amir and May found themselves alone in the observation chamber, watching the instrument pulse faintly under the artificial lights. Amir sighed, running a hand through his hair. You know, May, before all of this, I was an idealist. I believed in people, our potential. But now, he gestured vaguely toward the machine. Now I'm not so sure. What if we just use it to hurt each other, to control instead of to heal? May studied him for a long moment. In her eyes there was no judgment, only an old, weathered hope. Would you rather we never found it? That we stayed as we are now? Divided, afraid. I don't know, he murmured. She smiled faintly. You do know. You're just scared. So am I, but maybe that's a sign we should try. If this thing forces us to confront our ugliness, maybe that's what we need before we can appreciate our beauty. They sat in silence, staring at the glowing relic that might shape the very soul of humanity. And the world waited for them to decide.